speak to your question just a little bit. I think that New Hampshire is a state where a lot of people are, even with all the attention, are fairly private about their politics. And so there were a lot of people who were undecided up until the end, and it was a really quick turnaround from Iowa to New Hampshire. It's a little bit of, in some ways the polls couldn't quite catch up, I think. But I do think that Hillary Clinton benefited not so much from, I mean, I have to tell you what I've done. I have watched probably more times than I care to tell you clips of that moment where they described it as a meltdown or whatever. And when I watched it and listened to the commentators talk about it, I saw one thing, the framing of that. But then when I mute it and watch it, I would never have taken that from it. And so it really reminds me that, you know, not just, I mean, disproportionately women voted for Hillary Clinton, for Senator Clinton. But I think that there were some people who may not have had a strong preference going in, especially women, who didn't like that. I mean, they didn't like it because it's the kind of thing that anybody who has been in public life as a woman has experienced. And I mean, I think that it needs to be taken as a sign that that style of politics is not going to be tolerated this time around. And that goes broadly, not just for women, but also in terms of any sort of race baiting or anything of that sort. I think it's really important that we all take a strong stand on that, because too often it's happened, and it happens through the subtle or not so subtle framing, and taking an excerpt out of context and so on, and I mean, I have no reason to think that there won't be further efforts to do that. Of course, because it's happened in the past.
Is there anything to the, I heard that since the caucus was moved up, is there anything to the I've heard the pundits say that Obama didn't get the youth vote that he was expecting because many of the students were still on break?
Oh, in Iowa?
No, in New Hampshire.
They were there, but they didn't. Dartmouth was in session, and the University of New Hampshire wasn't, I think, or vice versa.
He cleaned up in that age group. It's a matter of how many of them show up.
Right.
In Iowa, I went to the Obama victory party. And I was the oldest person there. Hundreds of people.
What time did you go?
That brings up a good question on a local level. This is a college town.
Huh?
On registration, how does that play out?
They tend to be registered in other counties.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility to be registered in Whatcom County, but there's a time limit on that, isn't there?
No, you can register the
Can you register the day of the caucus? Now, that's a very important issue, I think, that they brought out, that the college kids get registered on the day of the caucus.
Yeah, they were signing up a lot of new voters at the caucuses, tens of thousands of them.
When Rick Larson and Maria Cantwell were first elected, a lot of students were working on and following campaigns, some of them for class credit, where they would choose Democrat or Republican or whatever. You know, so nobody directed them towards the candidate or campaign. But then they would write papers. I mean, a lot of us do that. And then they choose and get involved in politics that way. It's an introduction to civic life. And their grade is based not on anything they work for, but on what they write. And Rick Larson became popular, you know, quite young, accessible. He came to Western a lot. And those students mobilized, and they moved people by car from precinct to precinct. They used special ballots. And, I mean, they were very sophisticated in their organization to get out the vote. And at Western, if you compare the number of students that had voted in the previous election, presidential election, with that election, the turnout was just about exactly the number of votes that Maria Cantwell won by. Now, I'm not saying all of those students voted for Maria Cantwell, because that's not well, maybe a lot of them, but what I'm saying is that that kind of a mobilization, maybe not at this caucus level, but when you get into the general election, can be very, very important. And, you know, I think that parties should really be urged to include students in your outreach, because they're very effective and energetic.
I
Believe
think
me.
actually you need to go back and look at who was involved that year. You had student body president Vic, I forget Vic's last name, but he was
Victor,
exceptional.
oh, you're talking about Victor?
I'm
Yeah,
talking about Victor.
Yeah, wasn't
was
he great?
exceptional. He
Yeah.
was the one that got the kids working for Rick Larson.
Yeah.
He was the one who worked with me to bring 2,000 people out to see Bradley.
Wasn't he great?
He was absolutely
Yeah.
outstanding, and he was well rewarded by Rick Larson, who didn't give him a job.
Well, I bet Victor's done all right.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, let me talk just a little bit about a couple of things that I've done. I study women in politics, and especially I've done some writing on women governors, and I attended a conference, it's been almost 3 years ago now, in Albany, New York, and it was a number of scholars and activists who came together to study the first woman president. That was a topic. It was before Hillary Clinton. You know, I think all of us had kind of expected that she would run, but before anything was declared. But there were a lot of people that knew her and knew of her in Albany. And one thing that I took away from people I talked with, people who weren't supporters of her, you know, some of whom were Republicans, was that when she works with people in small groups, and especially this was true in that part of New York State, which is largely Republican and also very economically depressed. And it was hard to find people who had a bad thing to say about her, because they said she had a problem-solving orientation. And I certainly think, in the way I see her presented in the national media, that I don't know that I would say that. I mean, and I can tell you this, about when I do a gut check about Democratic Party politics, I grew up in Muncie, Indiana. I get on the phone or I make a visit to central Indiana. And I can tell you this, that politics is very different there. When I say she has very high negatives, I can tell you I mean it. But what I know, people's voices change, you know, there's a certain amount of, I can't explain it, but it's something really special that was felt for Bill and now is especially felt for her. I'm looking at a picture of her here. But I can tell you that the people who have worked with her and who know her say that they really have a positive impression of her. And so I think that part of what happened in New Hampshire was that in the last push, she really got around and showed that side to other people. Now I say to myself, and now I'm not a supporter of Senator Clinton. I need to tell you that. I haven't made up my mind, but I can tell you this right now, that I made up my mind a long time ago that at this stage of the game I wasn't going to give a penny or give my support to anybody who supported that war resolution.
Exactly.
I'll talk about my politics, but I'm just going to say that doesn't mean in the end I'll support the party, but right now that is really important to me.